All right, probably just need another second here, and the other stream will be up and running. We got about 5 minutes until the close. Even though this one will be a short one, we'll still get to see the closing price here on the Qs and SPY. Let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. This is Ifan from the Strategic Day Trader, and this is your market wrap for September 28th, 2021. SPY down 2%. Qs was gapping down, I think 1.6 this morning, but now down 2.8. And then IWM down 2.4. Coming into today, we were looking at the divergence. We did have an area for the SPY to trigger the bearish bias. We had the Qs were already bearish, but underneath 268.60 bearish, and then IWM we were saying probably not going to happen, but would have to completely negate yesterday's bar. Well, that's why we go over it. That's why we talk about it, because even though if I consider it maybe unlikely, it can still happen, and that's what the IWM did. No divergence today. Q, SPY all bearish. All right, so we talked about the daily sell setup in the Qs here, continuing lower into the lows. SPY not quite there yet. Okay, we did note kind of out of the three, Qs being the bearish, SPY kind of in the middle. IWM was looking bullish. All of them are weak now. Qs though, the weakest of the bunch. All right, so what does this mean for going into tomorrow? Going into tomorrow, now for the Qs and the SPY, we've got a decent move already. We're a bit extended. Okay, so of course, after a wide range day, we'll probably get a more narrow day. I'm expecting if we gap up tomorrow, we'll probably get sold, but it won't necessarily be as big as today's. That's less likely. And then if we gap down, I think we'll probably get bought a little bit. And then we'll kind of see what that looks like into the afternoon. So we're extended away from the 20 MA. We're kind of in a similar situation we were here. The big difference is the way that we ended. Okay, we ended this with this wide range green bar. So going into the next day, I said, well, we got to see what this retracement looks like because it's already started. And typically when you're going to play a sell setup, you don't want it to have such a big green bar to start the move up. Okay. You want to see, narrow bars, or even you can have the big bar at the end, but you don't want it at the beginning. And so we got this really sloppy kind of sell setup, and I was saying, okay, underneath this green bar, we'll trigger the sell setup. We'll be back to bearish. We didn't trigger it. We kind of did this kind of grind higher, and you can see kind of how this green bar started the momentum. We're not getting that this time. Okay, there's a little bit of a bounce, but it's not the same. So, it was as we base here, that's going to be more bearish. If we get a slight move up tomorrow, still bearish. So I'm expecting lower. And I was expecting lower into the end of the week, last week, but we didn't want to come in. We're kind of still grinding up higher. And the main thing that we were watching for was that daily sell setup. Now, it doesn't make it easy when the market is gapping a large amount because would have been nice to get that position short that we were anticipating at 368.60, but unless you're going to start your position in the after hours or in the pre-market, sometimes it's harder to chase these things, okay? So if we gap down tomorrow, we'll probably get bought just because we're so extended on the hourly and on the daily now. But otherwise, I'm going to stay bearish for tomorrow. And again, into the end of the week, looking to see what kind of sell setup we get and if we're going to continue this trend and then potentially break on the weekly now. So here's the weekly pullback that we have in place. Daily's already gone into a downtrend. Hourly's already gone into a downtrend. Will the weekly start to come in as well and then produce lower highs and lower lows, right? So that's why we kind of walk through the time frames, right? Hourly helps us to predict hours and days. Daily helps us to predict days and weeks. This is a pretty bearish looking daily, but not a good time to start a new short necessarily on the Qs. Okay. All right. So trend day today in the Qs and SPY. And so because of the bearishness of the gap, because of the confirmation that we were getting, I really wanted to get something short, to play along with the market. And I didn't really get the follow through. I was looking on this HYZ, and that's really because I think I was a little bit late with the entry. This was called in the room. That it was a pretty strong bounce. We got this base at the lows, and I'll show you what I wanted to see and kind of why this wasn't initially played. So I just wanted to see a little bit more of a base here. You can see the extent of the base, but we already had this nice move down, right? And so I didn't want to be getting it too soon after it already had a nice sell-off, right? I don't want to be getting it too late. And so I want to see this base a little bit longer. It just started to go. And then why I did play this is because I like that these two attempts to move up got rejected. So that helps, right? Because if I'm worried about all the sellers that are going to be looking to take profit, right, and all the longs have already gotten out, when I see something like that, I know that there are new longs getting in or shorts covering. I don't know why the buying is happening, but I know it's happening. And so what's going to happen when it breaks like this, then those buyers are going to get out, and then short sellers who maybe got out too early are going to look to get back in or miss out on the rest of the move. So that was the play on the HYZN. Now, because I'm getting it late, I knew that the stop was not the most secure there. So did kill it over this pivot here. So we took half and then we killed the rest of the pivot, basically break even. So it wasn't a big play on the HYZN. And it kind of set up the same way again in the afternoon, which was this base. And then the 15-minute, again, looked like it was a little bit too many bars down. Now, you could have said, well, why didn't you play the sell setup here? And that's fine. This is actually a valid sell setup, right? But notice the way that it did the sell setup, because you also could have made the same case for it there when that triggered, or when it broke the previous bar's low there. So when I see that it's doing this thing where it's kind of breaking and then getting bought, breaking and then getting bought, I'm going to wait for something different to happen. I'm seeing that maybe it's not ready to come in yet. A lot of red, green so far. So a lot of back and forth and conflict. And so I want to see until, we get some little bit more confirmation. And sometimes, and typically waiting for confirmation, the downside is you may miss out on the first entry. And so this was the next entry. Didn't end up playing this one, just a little bit extended on the 20 MA. Okay, so the 5 was good, but at that time of day, I need it to be off the 20 MA on the 15 once I get past 130. So that's just, what I prefer, what gives me a little bit higher odds in the afternoon. So that's what I would like to see. It worked okay. It looks like it made about you would close here at the end of the day for about an hour on this. Okay. I really wanted to get something short along with the market. We talked about this HYZN, and there were some good longs today as well. Go in the morning, and then pretty nice move up here in the afternoon. This one wasn't easy though, unless you got that first entry in the morning. So you had to be ready to do this. Had to be ready because really it was just like a 1 minute and 2 minute, and then as long as you don't get shaken out of it, I think that was the opportunity there. UNFI also very, very bullish, but again, I think the move comes up right here. This is a pretty textbook 1, 2, 3 here. One inside bar stays towards the top and then takes off from there. Both are pretty good gaps, so they're valid plays. They're not just things that afterwards, okay, that's a green bar, should have been played. These were both in the go-go as well, gapping to resistance and then breaking above it. Both pretty solid gaps and pretty good opportunities. But if my focus was I wanted to get something short, today is a trend day, or maybe just a really bearish move, doesn't have to be trending all day. I wanted to be along for the ride. It's just, HYZN ended up being one that kind of had to be played twice based on the way that's set up for me, based on the patterns that I execute. Okay, so I don't think it was the easiest day. Market moved a lot. So it's gonna, seem like a lot of things moved, but I'm looking for the things that are somewhat unique, somewhat on their own page, right? And so you can see this HYZ and look at all the volume that it got today. That gets me interested. That we could have a big day today. But sometimes, being on its own page also means, it's going to have some tough timing with the market. That was one of the things why also we decided to go to break even on that back half, is because market was staying weak and this was already starting to bounce. So I was like, okay, well, this thing may be due for a bounce and we'll just have to find another way in. And it did give another entry, but I didn't think it was quite good enough. Okay, so we'll see what happens over the next few days. I wouldn't be surprised if things get a bit sloppy. We saw how kind of sloppy the market was. We got divergence into the end of the week last week, but overall bias bearish. We just need to see some kind of sell setup or the market kind of base here for a bit longer before the next leg down. Okay? All right, guys. Hope you did well today. We'll be back at it tomorrow, and I will talk to you then. Have a good evening.